Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before we get going, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell. It helps us out a ton, and make sure you don't miss any future deep dives. So today we're launching into the world of international agreements with the Hague Code of Conduct, HCOC for short. Think of it kind of like the global rulebook for keeping those seriously powerful ballistic missiles in check. We'll be exploring what it is, why it matters, and where India fits into all this, especially relevant for anyone prepping for those UPSC exams, by the way.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic and one that I think often gets overlooked, in the broader discussions of international security. But as we'll see, the HCOC plays a crucial role in promoting transparency and building confidence among nations when it comes to these, well, potentially game-changing weapons.
Exactly. And here's something that might surprise you. Over 140 countries have signed on to this agreement, but India decided to join the party a bit later in 2016. We'll uncover why that timing was so interesting and what it tells us about India's role on the world stage, as it evolves. But first, let's break down what exactly the HCOC is all about. Imagine a group of nations coming together and saying, hey, let's be upfront about our missile programs. That's the essence of the Hague Code of Conduct. It's not about stopping missiles altogether, but about making sure things don't, well, spiral out of control.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's a voluntary, legally non-binding agreement built on the idea that transparency and communication can help prevent misunderstandings and reduce the risk of escalation, particularly when it comes to those missiles capable of carrying weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, so it's not like a hard and fast treaty,
Yeah.
but more of a we're all in this together kind of agreement. But what does it actually involve? What are the nuts and bolts of the HCOC?
So at its core, the HCOC asks participating countries to do two main things. First, they agree to give advance notice before they launch any ballistic missiles or space launch vehicles. Think of it as a heads up to the international community, like, hey, we're about to launch something, but don't worry, it's not an attack.
Right. So sending out a memo before you set off a bunch of fireworks. Right.
Yeah.
Helps avoid any unnecessary alarm bells going off. So pre-launch notifications check. What's the second commitment?
The second part is about sharing information. Countries agree to provide an annual declaration outlining their policies on ballistic missile and space launch vehicle launches. This includes things like the purpose of their programs, the types of missiles they have, and their overall approach to missile development.
So it's about being open about your intentions and capabilities. This way, no one's left in the dark wondering what their neighbors are up to. Now, before we dive deeper into the HCOC, let's make sure everyone's on the same page about what we're talking about. Ballistic missiles, these aren't your average rockets, are they?
Definitely not. They are in a league of their own. A ballistic missile follows a high, arching trajectory, with much of its flight unpowered. Think of it like throwing a baseball. You put in the initial force and then gravity takes over. That's ballistic.
I get it. So it's that initial powerful launch that sets it on its course, and then physics does the rest, almost like a superpowered slingshot. And that's what makes them so potentially dangerous, especially if you consider the kinds of payloads they can carry.
Exactly, and that's why the HCOC is so important. It's about managing those risks and preventing the worst-case scenarios from becoming a reality.
So the HCOC is all about keeping things cool on the global stage, right? It's about creating a sense of predictability and trust, even among countries that might not always see eye to eye.
Precisely. The HCOC aims to prevent the proliferation of ballistic missiles capable of carrying weapons of mass destruction. We're talking about preventing a bad situation from escalating into a catastrophic one.
And it's this focus on transparency that helps prevent anyone from, jumping to conclusions or overreacting. If countries are open about their missile programs, it reduces the chances of miscalculation or unintended escalation.
You've hit the nail on the head. It fosters a sense of responsibility on the international stage. It's about nations recognizing that they have a shared interest in preventing the spread of these incredibly dangerous weapons.
Now we know that the HCOC isn't the only player in the game when it comes to controlling missile technology. There's also the Missile Technology Control Regime, or MTCR, which we hear a lot about in international relations discussions. Yeah. How does the HCOC fit into that picture?
That's a great question, and it's one that often causes confusion. Think of the HCOC and the MTCR as two sides of the same coin. They both aim to limit the spread of dangerous missile technology, but they have distinct approaches. The MTCR is a bit more exclusive. It's a group of 35 countries that have agreed to restrict exports of certain missile technologies and equipment. It's like a suppliers club, trying to control the flow of potentially dangerous materials.
So it's about controlling the supply side of the equation. But the HCOC takes a broader approach, right?
Exactly. The HCLC, on the other hand, is open to any country willing to join. It focuses on encouraging responsible behavior and transparency among all nations, regardless of their technological capabilities.
So it's not just about who have the technology, but how they use it. It's about creating a global norm where responsible behavior is expected and well rewarded.
Exactly. And that's where India's decision to join the HCOC becomes so interesting. Remember, this agreement has been around since 2002, but India didn't become a member until 2016.
That's right. And that timing is significant, isn't it? It
Yeah.
tells us something about India's evolving foreign policy and its place in the world.
Absolutely. But we'll delve into all of that after a quick look. Stay with us. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we jump into India's involvement in the HDOC, I think it's important to ground this discussion in some real-world context. We've been talking about ballistic missiles and these global agreements, but what does it all mean for India specifically?
That's a great point. It's easy to get lost in the abstract world of international relations, but this stuff has real-world implications. And for India, those implications are especially significant, given its geopolitical situation.
Exactly. India finds itself in a neighborhood that's, let's say, a bit more dynamic than some others. You've got the ongoing tensions with Pakistan, China's rapidly growing military power and assertiveness in the region, and of course, the ever unpredictable North Korea just across the Himalayas.
Talk about a complex security landscape. So how does the HCOC factor into all this? It might seem like a rather distant concern when you're dealing with such immediate pressures.
It's more connected than you might think. For India, the HCOC offers a way to demonstrate its commitment to responsible behavior, even as it develops its own missile capabilities. Remember, India has legitimate security concerns, and it needs to be able to defend itself. But by being transparent about its missile program through the HCOC, India can signal to its neighbors and the world that it's not seeking to escalate tensions.
So it's a way of saying, we have these capabilities, but we're not looking for trouble. It's about reassuring others and preventing unnecessary anxieties that could lead to, misunderstandings or even miscalculations.
Precisely. And remember, India also has a robust and growing space program. They're launching satellites for scientific research, telecommunications, disaster management, you name it.
Right. India's space program is a source of national pride and a symbol of its technological prowess.
And this is where the HTOC's pre-launch notifications become particularly relevant. By providing advance notice of its space launches, India can help distinguish those activities from anything that might be perceived as, let's say, a military threat. It helps avoid those heart-stopping moments when someone might mistake a satellite launch for something, well, a bit more worrisome.
It's like putting a label on things, saying, this is for science, not for war. Especially in a region as tense as South Asia, that kind of clarity can go a long way. And speaking of clarity, let's bring this back to our UPSC aspirants. Understanding the nuances of India's participation in the HCOC is crucial for anyone looking to, grasp the complexities of India's foreign policy and security strategy. It's a topic that often comes up in the GS2 syllabus.
Absolutely. And it's not just about memorizing facts and dates. It's about understanding the strategic calculations behind India's decision to join the HCOC in 2016. Remember, this wasn't an impulsive move. It was a carefully considered decision, and the timing tells us a lot about India's evolving role on the world stage.
Okay, let's unpack that timing a bit. Why 2016? What was happening in the world and specifically in India's neighborhood that might have influenced this decision?
Well, 2016 was a pretty pivotal year in many respects. Tensions with Pakistan were on the rise, and there were a series of cross-border incidents that, raised concerns about a potential escalation. China was continuing its rapid military modernization, and its assertiveness in the South China Sea was becoming increasingly evident. And let's not forget North Korea, which was conducting a series of increasingly provocative missile tests, much to the alarm of its neighbors and the international community.
It sounds like a perfect storm of geopolitical challenges brewing.
Exactly. And against this backdrop, India's decision to join the HCOC can be seen as a calculated move to demonstrate its commitment to stability and responsible behavior, even as it faced these mounting security concerns.
It's like India was stepping up and saying, look, we're not going to be drawn into a reckless arms race. We're committed to dialogue, transparency, and the peaceful resolution of disputes.
You've captured the essence of it. India's membership in the HCAC was a way to project its image as a responsible and rising power, one that was willing to engage in multilateral efforts to address global security challenges.
So it was a way for India to signal its intentions and build confidence with the international community. But let's be honest, joining an agreement like the HCOC also involves certain limitations, right?
Of course, like any international agreement, there are always trade-offs to consider. India, like any sovereign nation, has to balance its national interests with its international commitments.
So what were some of the potential downsides that India might have weighed before joining the HCOC? Were there concerns that it might limit its freedom of action or its ability to, respond to security threats?
Those are valid questions. Some critics argue that joining the HCOC could hinder India's ability to develop and deploy its missile defense systems, or that it might give other countries a say in India's space program.
So it's about maintaining that strategic autonomy, that ability to make decisions based on your own national interests without being beholden to external pressures.
Exactly. But in the end, India decided that the benefits of joining the HCOC outweighed those potential concerns. It was a sign of India's growing confidence and its willingness to play a more prominent role in shaping the global norms around missile non-proliferation.
So India's decision to join the HCOC was a big deal, not just for India, but for the international community as a whole.
Absolutely. It added weight to the agreement and signaled that even major powers with complex security concerns were willing to embrace the principles of transparency and restraint when it came to ballistic missiles.
It's a reminder that international relations aren't just about military might or economic power. It's also about building trust, establishing norms, and working together to address shared challenges.
Well said. But let's not get too caught up in the present. The world is constantly changing, and the HCOC, like any international agreement, needs to adapt if it wants to stay relevant and effective.
That's right. We've seen how the geopolitical landscape has shifted even since India joined the HCOC in 2016. New technologies are emerging, new players are entering the scene, and the nature of threats is evolving. So what does the future hold for the HCOC? How can it keep pace with these rapid changes?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that we'll be exploring right after this. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been unpacking this kind of complex and often overlooked agreement, the Hague Code of Conduct, and exploring why it matters, especially for, well, a rising power like India. We've covered a lot of ground. So before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap. What are the key takeaways our listeners should remember about the HCOC?
I'd say the most important thing to remember is that the HCOC is a voluntary agreement, not a legally binding treaty. It's about fostering a culture of responsibility and transparency when it comes to ballistic missiles, encouraging nations to, think twice before hitting that launch button and to keep the global community in the loop.
Right, no one's forced to join, but the benefits of being part of this global effort are pretty clear, especially in a world where these incredibly powerful weapons have the potential to cause so much damage, even unintentionally.
Absolutely. And it's worth highlighting that the HCOC doesn't exist in isolation. It works hand in hand with other non-proliferation efforts like the Missile Technology Control Regime, which we discussed earlier. Together, they create a more comprehensive web, so to speak, to help control the spread of dangerous missile technology.
It's like a multi-layered approach to global security. And let's not forget the significance of India's decision to join the HCOC back in 2016. It was a strategic move, a signal to the world that India was committed to playing by the rules, even as it developed its own missile capabilities.
Yeah, it was a powerful statement. India was essentially saying, we're a responsible player on the global stage, and we're committed to working with the international community to address these shared security challenges. For anyone following India's evolving foreign policy, this is a must-know development.
Absolutely. And for those of you gearing up for the UPSC exams, remember the HCOC is a topic that frequently pops up in the GS2 syllabus. So make sure you've got this one locked down, the history, the goals, and especially India's role in it all. It's not just about ticking boxes. It's about demonstrating that you understand the complexities of international relations and how India is navigating this, well, this ever-changing landscape.
Right on. Because let's face it, the world isn't standing still. New technologies are emerging, new players are entering the arena, and the old rule book might need a bit of an update. We touched on this earlier, but let's dig a little deeper. What are some of the challenges the HCOC is facing in this rapidly evolving global context?
Well, one of the biggest challenges has to do with the rise of new technologies, like hypersonic missiles. These things are incredibly fast and agile, making them extremely difficult to track and intercept. It's like trying to hit a mosquito with a dart while it's, doing loop-the-loops. How do you even begin to incorporate these new systems into existing non-proliferation frameworks like the HCOT?
It's a tough question, and one that's keeping a lot of policymakers up at night. One possibility is to expand the scope of the HCOC to explicitly include these new technologies, but that's easier said than done. You've got to get everyone on board, and there's always the risk that countries might see it as an infringement on their right to develop their own defense capabilities.
Right, it's a delicate balancing act. And it's not just about new weapon systems. You've also got the increasing number of countries developing space capabilities, which adds another layer of complexity.
Exactly. How do you distinguish between a peaceful satellite launch and a potential missile test? How do you prevent misunderstandings and miscalculations, especially in regions where tensions are already high? The HCOC's pre-launch notification system could play a role here, but it might need some tweaking to account for these new realities.
So it sounds like the HCOC is at a crossroads. It's got a solid track record, but it needs to evolve to keep pace with the changing world. But is it up to the task? Can it adapt to meet the demands of this new era of technological advancement and geopolitical shifts?
That's the big question. And there's no easy answer. One thing that seems clear is that the HCOC needs to find ways to become more robust, more inclusive, and more adaptable.
More teeth, perhaps. More ways to ensure the countries are actually complying with the agreement and that there are consequences for those who don't?
Maybe, but you have to be careful. Remember, the HCOC's strength lies in its voluntary nature. Countries are more likely to join and abide by agreements that they perceive as, well, fair and equitable, not coercive. So finding that balance is key.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot between encouraging responsible behavior and enforcing strict rules. It's a tricky task, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's a necessary one if we want to prevent these incredibly destructive weapons from falling into the wrong hands or being used in ways that could have devastating consequences for all of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And it's a reminder that these issues aren't just, theoretical abstractions. They have real-world implications, and they affect all of us, whether we realize it or not.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. We've talked a lot about governments and international agreements, but what about the role of individuals? What can we, as ordinary citizens, do to support these efforts to prevent missile proliferation and promote global security?
That's a powerful question, and I think the answer is simple. Stay informed, stay engaged, and make your voice heard. Learn about the issues, talk to your elected officials, and support organizations that are working to make the world a safer place. Every little bit counts.
Beautifully put. It's a reminder that we all have a stake in this, and we can all play a role in shaping a more peaceful and secure future. So on that note of hope and collective action, it's time to say goodbye. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their incredible insights with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Always happy to, delve into these crucial topics.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of international relations. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our future deep dives. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world around you.